So this evening, who's this guy? Alex, that's me. I'm dialing in from Tauranga Moana. I grew up here in the Bay of Plenty, and I was actually in university down in Christchurch and grew up playing football, ran a pretty simple training regime for myself. I've always been fascinated by like natural movement. I used to ramp up my fitness for my football seasons in 2 weeks. I'd just run up the mount and I do press-ups and sit-ups. Throughout my life, obviously smashed, bashed, and crashed myself. That's taught me to learn a lot about my body so that I could be prepared to do the things I love to do, often associated with nature and sports. Gave up running 10 years ago, started yoga. Fast forward 8 years, I started running again. I found out that I was moving faster with less effort than most of the people around me. Turns out breath work, yoga, my diet, and other modalities that I've utilized for like mental and physical health had like helped me heaps. And all of a sudden I was moving differently to all these people that have been running for a long time and they were all pushing hard. And I was like, what's going on here? So trained as a geologist, worked in software for many years, finished up into last year, and I'm at the moment just pretty much communicating and trying to understand the magic behind what's underneath some of these tools and things that I've taken for granted for many years, and hoping to share that with people like yourselves all around the world. So tonight, let's get into it. We are going to cover our BOLT score. So this is our blood oxygen level test. This gives everyone on the call a baseline of like where our breathing level is and how functional it is. It's not a competition. It's just an indication of how functional we can breathe. We've got some insights about the connection between breathing and our energy systems in our body, detoxification, how it impacts stress, how it impacts sleep. Hopefully the smorgasbord will bring some insights for many curious humans that are on the call tonight and anyone viewing the recording. So we are going to get started with our BOLT score. So I've done a lot of trainings over my time, whether it's been through yoga or with other world-renowned organizations such as the Oxygen Advantage team. Recently, I'm doing further studies with that. And this test is a really basic and simple exercise that we can all do from the comfort of our couch to understand how functional our breathing is as a baseline. And that'll provide you insights throughout the rest of the call this evening as to where you're at, okay? Why this is so interesting is that functional breathing is super important for functional movement. Okay, so we do this thing called breathing every day. They tell us we need to do 10,000 steps per day. Turns out the average person takes 20,000 breaths per day. But we don't even think about it. It just happens. And nobody ever focuses on if it's good, if it's bad. We're always concerned about the quantity and quality of the foods that we eat, the quantity and quality of the fluids that we drink. But often we know that the quality of air is important, but we never work with the quantity of it. And that's where the fascination is I have here. And you'll see some more insights as to what that means. So, how does this test work? Essentially, when we breathe, right, our body measures how much carbon dioxide is in our system at any one time. And when that becomes elevated, it sends a signal to the brain. And that brain then sends a signal to the diaphragm. Hey, we need to breathe more or we need to breathe less. Okay, and so that's the brain's loop for monitoring air hunger. Okay, so how much or how little we need to deliver working air to our system, into our lungs, to then create energy in our cells. So when we do this test, in essence, we are going to hold our breath. Now, this test isn't a competition, okay? And what I'll encourage you to do is that you were to look for the first sign of oxygen starvation. Okay, so we're going to do a light breath hold, and I'll instruct us through it soon. But when we're doing this breath hold, right, which will be simply pinching our nose, I want you to focus on the first sign of air hunger. Okay, so it might be like a little bloop in the belly, could be a little shake of the diaphragm, could be a little in the chest, might be a little ooh in the throat, or it could be a feeling in the head like, ooh, I need to breathe. That's the signal that I want you to become aware of with your breathing so that we can make the test. So this tool, what we're going to do is we're going to sit upright wherever you are, from the comfort of your couch, or wherever you might be dialing in from this evening. I'm going to get you all to inhale just to a nominal level. I'm going to get you to exhale fully. And then I'm going to get you to pinch your nose, okay, at the bottom of the exhale. At the bottom of the exhale, we've expelled most of the air from our lungs. That's the important baseline for us. And when we're holding, I'm going to put a timer on the screen. And from the moment that pinch happens, take your score when you feel that first sign of a willingness or a want to breathe. That is your BOLT score. Okay? So I'm just going to get up the timer from our wonderful friends at Google. And I'm going to put that on the screen. And share this tab instead. And I'm going to put it actually on stopwatch. Okay, so what I want everyone to do is to find their comfortable position. I want you to breathe in gently, breathe out fully, and at the end of your exhale, pinch the nose and observe the time that it takes for you to have that first desire of air hunger within your body. Okay, so just being with your pinched nose and noticing when that first urge to breathe is. Mentally note your score. As you're there sitting, pinching your nose, remember it's not a competition to hold your breath for a very long time. It's about noticing that pinch, that sensation within the body of an urge to breathe. Once that happens, you can let go of your nose, note down that score in your head or on a piece of paper. Just taking note what the duration of that time is for your BOLT score. Okay. If you are going over this time, you are a superstar at this stage. What I'd love for everyone to do is, if you've just done that, drop in your BOLT score in the chat. And it's really interesting just to observe where our score's at and what that looks like across the board. It's always fascinating to see the range of where people are at within their breathing. Awesome. 17s, 20s. Fantastic. 20s, 22. There we go. 25. Nice. Alrighty. 27. So what does this all mean? Okay, so this score, this test has been proven scientifically to be an indication of how functional our breathing is. If we are essentially below 10, it probably means our everyday breathing is noisy, irregular, labored. You sigh or you yawn a lot. Your sleep's probably disrupted. You're probably quite fatigued, right? Looks like nobody by the looks of this so far is below 10, so that's really good. And so by working on that breath, if our score was that low, it'd be really beneficial to our overall health. If your score is about 10 to 20, your breathing may be compromised by blocked nose, wheezing, coughing. Your sleep might be disrupted. Energy and concentration might be lower. By using breathing exercises, you will be able to dramatically improve your sleep quality, reduce your breathlessness, and enhance your health and fitness. If you're at about a 20 to 30, your breathing's relatively quiet, relatively calm, relatively effortless, and it's a good score. If you're looking to go further with your health and your fitness, going above up to about 30 is really, really awesome. If you're exercising regularly, whether you're running or moving, have a busy life, doing some different challenges throughout life, you'll notice a massive difference every time you increase that BOLT score by about 5 seconds. If you're like an athlete, athletes should have a BOLT score of about 40 plus, okay? But just because you're an athlete doesn't necessarily mean that you have functional breathing. So they've actually found that lots of people who appear to be high performance actually have dysfunctional breathing, and so they can make massive gains through actually harnessing their breath. Okay, so I'll leave that for you this evening to take note of that. You can run this test every morning if you're working with the breath to give you your baseline, and feel free to play with that test. So, energy, how we actually breathe. A common belief is that to move faster or get more energy when we are puffed is to breathe more. It really actually couldn't be further from the truth. As populations, we are chronic overbreathers. And this is due to some of our diet adaptations to a lot more soft foods these days, a lot more processed foods. So our jaw structure, our facial structure actually isn't developing strength and resilience and ability due to the low amounts of fiber in our diet. We also have lazy movement patterns, sedentary lifestyles, and actually humans, like, I'd never really been taught anything about breathing and why it was important for probably the first 20 odd years in my life, which is wild. So how we actually breathe, what happens, right? We talked about our body's system senses our carbon dioxide level in our body. The first step is that triggers our diaphragm, okay? So our diaphragm gets pulled down, and that draws air down into our lungs, preferentially through our nasal cavity, okay? The primary role of our nose is to warm, humidify, and filter air, okay? Our mouth is not designed for humidification, filtering, or warming and cooling of air. You'll notice if you breathe with your mouth open a lot, you get a very dry mouth. When I'm on calls like this, I get a very, very dry mouth. And I know about it because my body's not used to talking so much or so much air moving in and out of that cavity within my body. Our nose has superpowers. One of those core superpowers is nasal nitric oxide. Okay, so nitric oxide was thought of as just this random gas. Turns out our nose produces it. What it does is it's a vasodilator, so it dilates our blood vessels. When we have our mouth closed and breathe through our nose, it dilates our blood vessels in our lungs, making oxygen exchange, carbon dioxide exchange easier. That means it takes less energy to get energy to the rest of our body. Okay, so it's like a free energy source. Just by changing the tap from mouth to nose, it makes it easier for our lungs to breathe. Same thing with the humidification, right? If we've got a choice between breathing in dry air that's not humidified through our mouth, what do you think happens to our lungs, right? They're meant to be moist and soft. Well, things dry out when you breathe dry air. Okay, so again, by using our nose, say if you're down south and you're in some drier climates, again, even more important. Okay, helps with those lungs, lung health, gain less energy to exchange gas within the body. So, term for our body's monitoring of carbon dioxide that causes us to breathe, that causes the diaphragm to move down. It's called chemoreceptivity. I've tried to make this as simple as possible, recognizing that there's probably some very curious humans here on the call. And this is my dum-dum diagram of how essentially carbon dioxide and oxygen is exchanged in our body. Okay. Something that blows my mind is that our blood at any one time is saturated with 98% oxygen. Okay, so right now, if you've got like a fancy smartwatch, it can tell you your specific oxygen content, your SpO2, and it'll say it's anywhere from 95 to 98%. So again, contrary to belief, I need to breathe more to get more energy to my cells. You don't. Our blood is already saturated with 98% oxygen. Okay, so in reality, we're never really short of oxygen. It's actually our governing factor of carbon dioxide. And so within our veins, right, as our blood's moving through, to release an oxygen into the cells to create energy, right, need to release carbon dioxide, okay? And so when we increase our carbon dioxide content in our veins, essentially it forces oxygen into our cells easier because there's already 98% saturation of oxygen within this vein. So if we elevate the carbon dioxide in this, essentially it forces more oxygen into our cells. More oxygen in our cells means more energy for our body to move easier, do the things that we need it to do, whether that's metabolism, whether that's running, whether that's walking, whether that's looking after the kids, whether that's you name it. So that's why when we actually use breathing techniques to cultivate a higher tolerance for carbon dioxide in our venous system, it has massive advantages to making it easier on our body. So in essence, we need to breathe less to increase our energy. Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, the average person breathes 20,000 times per day. That's the average Western person. Okay. The optimal breathing cadence or rhythm is essentially 6 breaths per minute. Okay, so 4 seconds in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 seconds out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is the normal breathing rhythm of optimized breathing. Okay, due to our diets, due to our lifestyle choices, the average person is breathing almost twice as much. If people have asthma or other respiratory challenges, they're probably breathing 30,000 times a day, 40,000 times a day. So if we're not training our breath and we are actually breathing more, what then happens to our incidence chance of just breathing in more pathogens for the day? Right? If I'm breathing half as much as the person next to me, and the same volume of air around us contains all of the same bacteria and whatever else might be in it, dust, whatever it might be. If I'm just breathing at a much slower rate, I breathe in half as much of the stuff that the person breathing twice as much as me breathes. I essentially give myself a 50% increase or chance of being healthier just by breathing 50% less air. That's massive. Okay, so when we're looking at the body to increase energy, breathing less is the number one thing we can do to increase energy and defend ourselves against pathogens in the environment. Detoxification. I think this was a crowd favorite from Hannah. Hopefully we can share some insights here. So what is interesting is that carbon dioxide production in the human body is about 200 milliliters per minute. That's quite a lot, really, when you think about it. So this is a 750 ml bottle, so we probably produce about that much carbon dioxide per minute, which is a bit, okay? Remember, this is a byproduct of our cellular respiration. So for an oxygen molecule to leave our 98% saturated blood, kicks out a CO2 molecule, which then enables our food, our glucose, our fats, and our proteins to provide energy for the body. So if we have dysfunctional breathing and a dysfunctional ability to get carbon dioxide into that system, or we have a low tolerance for carbon dioxide in that system, that also means we have a low efficiency system in processing the glucose, in processing the fats, in processing the proteins. Okay, so even though we might be cramming in all the good stuff, if our breathing's super dysfunctional, our body's still going to struggle to metabolize whatever it needs for optimal health. As we know, carbon dioxide provides the strongest stimulus to the need to breathe. Carbon dioxide is carried in the blood in three ways: 5% in our dissolved plasma, 30% combined with blood proteins, and 65% is converted to bicarbonate ions for transportation in the blood. That's the interesting one, okay? So what that means is that 65% of the carbon dioxide in our blood essentially hits the blood, and as a bicarbonate ion, fancy chemistry science word, that's HCO3 minus, that means it shifts the pH scale of our blood. And so carbon dioxide is essentially one of the primary causes of blood pH to rise and fall. So in essence, if our breathing is functional, our blood pH is also functional. If our breathing is dysfunctional, our blood pH is very variable, right? Or it can be in a constant state of stress because it's not getting what it needs. And as you can see here, it's a very fine line between alkalosis and acidosis. Okay? And so with functional breathing, it really supports the body's blood pH. Like I drink alkaline water because a lot of the things that we eat and consume in our world are acidic, right? I breathe nasally. I have functional breathing to support my body to recover when doing lots of exercise, because byproducts of things like coffee's acidic, running with lactic acid buildup, that's acidic, right? And so if we utilize our breath correctly, we can harness the natural byproduct of that HCO3 to stabilize our blood away from acidosis and keep it in a stable position. Really, really, really powerful. So when we hyperventilate or overbreathe, that shifts the balance, okay? And then that sends the signal to the body to change our breathing, okay? If we have low functional breathing, that means our body essentially runs a very fine line across maintaining this pH, again, taking a lot more energy to do so, increasing fatigue, and then also the cellular production of energy. So just to summarize on that, essentially the primary functions of carbon dioxide in our system: primary regulator of blood pH. It's the catalyst for the release of oxygen from the blood into our cells. It's also responsible for dilating of our smooth muscle, so of the tissues of our capillaries in our circulatory system. And so what we'll do is we will dive into what that looks like with quite a basic engineering picture. Don't get scared. It's a lot more simple than it looks, okay? So what I'll just bring you awareness to is that if the dioxide in our body decreases, right? So if we are over breathing and letting out lots of carbon dioxide from our system, and our brain has a low chemoreceptivity to the carbon dioxide, it constricts and makes our blood vessels smaller, okay? When our blood vessels are smaller, that makes it harder for our heart to pump things around our body, okay? When we have functional breathing, our carbon dioxide level and our tolerance for that increases. And with that increase, it increases the diameter of those arteries, which makes fluid flow easier, makes it easier on our heart, makes it easier for our system to exchange what it needs between those cell walls. Okay, so low carbon dioxide, tight blood vessels in our body, higher carbon dioxide, higher tolerance, dilated, larger pipe, higher flow, easier on the heart, easier to get energy to our cells. Stress. Just a reminder that if anyone's got questions throughout this evening, feel free to drop them in the chat as we're going. Looked out for a photo of what our diaphragm looks like and what's on the inside, because quite often we walk around with these marvelous bodies and we see everyone from the outside, but very rarely do we look inside, and it's quite hard to do. So the first question I have is essentially, do you actually understand where your diaphragm is in your body? If you don't, visually, you can see here, it pretty much follows the base of our rib cage, and it's directly connected into our lumbar spine here, okay? It's also fused into our pericardium, which is the sac that holds the heart. Okay, so that breathing muscle, as that goes up and down, our heart rides on that. So if we have a dysfunctional diaphragm and the breath's going a million miles an hour and it's all shallow and it's not really functional, what do you think's happening to that heart sac or that pericardium that contains the heart in it with that connection? All right, so that probably increases the stress that our heart, that our body experiences due to that connection, okay? An easy way to find your diaphragm in your body is that you can take your two hands, do little right angles like that, and just place them on the outside of your lowest ribs. And when you inhale, see if you can feel your lower ribs expanding. And if you can feel those lower ribs expanding, in essence, that means you're functionally beginning to understand how that diaphragm's working when we're breathing, okay? That's the aim of the game, is to get that functional and really drawing all of our lungs down and that air right into all of it, reducing the stress on our heart, maximizing all of the space in our lungs for gas exchange, decreasing stress on the body. Okay. Some of you might have fancy watches that measure things like heart rate variability. It's quite topical at the moment. If you've got an Apple Watch and it tells you how well your sleep was last night, that is also an indication of your heart rate variability. So how consistent or inconsistent essentially the breathing is with the rate of heart rate. And that's directly correlated to how functional that diaphragm breathing connection is and how deeply our body can drop into a rest or digest state, or how frequently it's in a stressed out state. So this intersection between the diaphragm and our heart, super critical to reducing stress within our body. What's also fascinating about this junction is that our vagus nerve directly passes through a gap, like it's literally a hole. If you look up into the diaphragm, there's this big hood. There's literally a hole that's specifically for the vagus nerve to go straight through, and it runs all the way back up the backside of that heart. And when we look into that, this is our vagus nerve, in essence, that hood shape, right, of our diaphragm sits here, and it's the intersect between all of our digestion system and soft tissue organs in the bottom. The hood essentially caps it here, and then it controls the intersection because it's fused with the heart sac and the breathing sacs, right? It's the interface between all of the gut, all of the heart, all of the lungs, right? So if we have this main breathing muscle poorly trained or it's dysfunctional, if we shake that up a lot, well, it probably rattles the bottom quite a bit, and it probably rattles the top quite a bit. Okay, and so in essence, that has a massive governing effect on our gut's ability to be stressed or unstressed, our lungs, and our heart as well. Okay, so you might have heard of the term when we talk about the nervous system being split into two branches, our parasympathetic and our sympathetic. Parasympathetic is our rest and digest, and sympathetic is our stress, our stressed out system, okay? And so if this muscle and our breathing is functional and connected, right, we have a higher probability of enabling and supporting our body to be in a parasympathetic nervous system state, rest and digest, right? So digest, support this system to work, rest or recovery, right? Support this system to get the rest of the cells what they need to recover, whether it's from walking the dog, whether it's from doing a workout online, going to yoga, going to Pilates, keeping up with the family. If that's dysfunctional, there's a high probability you'll be running in the sympathetic nervous system and you'll be stressed out. Okay, so it's a very powerful governor of the top and the bottom. Okay. That's essentially what I have on the stress front. Sleep. Last but not least, we're doing good for time. Getting a better night's sleep. Okay. We spend lots of hours in our waking day, but then primary role of sleep is to recharge, right? And recover from whatever's happened in our day. For like Hannah, she's been up since 4 a.m. and she can't wait to go to bed. Super important role. Everyone knows the importance of sleep. these 5 core questions, right? So we've done our BOLT scores. When we now look at sleep, right? So BOLT score is a tool. When we look at sleep, if we're waking up with a dry mouth, if we feel lethargic in the morning, if you or your partner snore, do you regularly go to toilet in the night? Do you wake with a blocked nostril, wheezing or coughing, right? Out of those 5 things, feel free to score them 1 for each. And if you experience 1 of them, 2 of them, 3 of them, 4 of them, 5 of them, or none of them, feel free to drop it in the chat. And I'll run through what some of these indicate. Okay. So in essence, when we wake up with a dry mouth, what that means is our body's probably quite lazily breathing through that mouth through the evening, right? That means that we're not humidifying that air properly. We're not getting that nasal nitric oxide down into our lungs. Our diaphragm's probably poorly engaged while we're sleeping. Again, we're reducing our ability to support our body naturally to drop into that rest and digest state. Okay, that affects our heart rate variability. That affects what our Apple Watch will tell us about how well our night's sleep is. Our Apple Watch doesn't tell us how to improve our sleep. It's a reactive tool, okay? Feeling lethargic in the morning, right? If we've been breathing poorly and the body's been having to work hard, we're in a stressful situation, if we've got dry air entering our lungs, we're not able to exchange gas effectively. In essence, it's taken us more energy while sleeping to recharge the body. Okay. With snoring, right, that's showing signs of dysfunctional breathing, can be via the mouth, can be via the nose. Via the nose, it can be turbulence in the nasal airways. We can use breathing techniques to unblock the nasal passages in our body. Sometimes, and it's an increasing volume of people in society, which I'm pretty curious about as to reasons why, have what they call a deviated septum. So that is in essence where the nasal cavity is increasing its wiggliness, and there is some surgical stuff that can be done to improve that. You can't just change that by using breathing techniques, but I always focus on how can I do everything in my superpowers so that I don't need surgery. And so again, have I used the toolbox? Have I used all of the things available to me, the knowledge that's out there to make that happen? That is essentially a functional piece. Waking up with a blocked nostril or nose or wheezing or coughing, right? If we're wheezing or coughing, high probability we've been mouth breathing all night, mouth open, dry. The body's been trying to get mucus, phlegm, things up into the system just to line essentially those pipes and tubes, right? If we're waking up blocked nostrils, right, we might not have been breathing correctly in the night, might not have been utilizing our nasal nitric oxide. Nasal nitric oxide, vasodilator, dilates the nasal airways and essentially frees up those airways. So a very simple technique that you can use is essentially in your day-to-day or when you wake up in the morning, if you do have a blocked nose, feel free to pinch the nose and then rock your head side to side for 20 seconds. Sounds a bit crazy. And then breathe in fully through your nose. Okay. By pinching the nose, keeping the mouth closed, essentially we're building up the nasal nitric oxide in the nostril. And then we are fully utilizing that dilation system to clear and open up the airways. Do that for 5 minutes, right? Big breath in again until the body comes back to a normal resting state. Go for a pinch again for 20 seconds. Do it again. That will support you to unblock your nose first thing in the morning. There we go. Natalie's trying it already. She's noticed the difference massively. Do it for 5 minutes. You'll be like, wow, I've just had like Vicks vapor drops. And you're like, yeah, it's free. Everyone's got Vicks vapor drops in their nose. We've just got to utilize them, okay? So, some other basics that you can do, right? Really simple during our awake state, during the days. I'll just encourage you to bring awareness to, am I closing my mouth throughout the day? Most simple thing. Am I at my desk, on my computer? All right, just mouth open, lazily, unconscious. Shut my mouth. Train my body to consciously use the superpowers of the nose. I'll really support my calmness in my body, my ease of gas exchange, and my cells will be able to be really energized, right? So we have more energy doing our work. Really, really simple one, okay? So we've talked about our bodies can be quite lazy at night. How do we nasal breathe during our sleep? Okay. In essence, mouth tape can be a useful way to train our mouths to sleep better. I don't have a significant amount of support for that right this second, but if you are interested further in learning more about mouth tape and things like that, feel free to just put a comment mouth in the chat. And I'll probably look at making an article or some information on that in the next couple of weeks. Happy to send that through. In essence, if we are mouth taping, what I'd encourage is that you test it out during the day first, okay? Don't go straight to the bedroom and wake up with your mouth taped and go, I can't breathe. And the body freaks out and then you're like, I don't want this thing, okay? Can you practice it during the day? Super supportive. Again, bringing awareness. How am I operating during my day-to-day? Will help start training the body to operate more effectively during the night. Because essentially we can train our breathing whilst we're sleeping and get the benefits during the day too. So it's kind of like free training for 8 hours of the night. Other ones is ventilation in bedrooms. I know our houses have become really well insulated, or they're on the up in New Zealand, which is good. We now have this thing called double glazing, which is fantastic. When we don't sleep in a well ventilated room, essentially it's like a gas chamber and we don't allow the body's natural ability to sense and respond to changes in temperature in the evening, okay? So our brain and our body is naturally wired to pick up on the change in humidity, the change in temperature at night, to command the body to signal to it, hey, look, it's sleep time, turn on all the rest and digest processes. If we're sleeping in hot, stuffy, boxed up rooms, the body struggles to know autonomically what those things are, and it doesn't receive the signals. So always, always, always aspire to have like just a window cracked slightly throughout the night. A little bit cooler temperature is really beneficial for supporting the nervous system to drop into that rest and digest state. Bum, 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 bum. And last gem for the evening is before going to bed, obviously lots of talk, cell phones, all of that good stuff, blue light, yada, yada, yada. Just get really present with your breath, shut your mouth, and just bring awareness to that breath before you go to sleep. Focus on just breathing through the nose, slowly, lightly, working on getting that air down into those lungs. If you do that for 5 minutes before bedtime, again, it's supporting the body to know, hey, I'm turning on that parasympathetic nervous system. I'm getting ready for sleep. I'm getting ready for rest and digest, getting ready to recharge. I'm getting ready to recover so that I can turn up tomorrow more energized, more engaged in life, and contribute whatever magic you have to contribute. So that has been our journey this evening. We've got 11 minutes left, which is great. So super happy to open the floor this evening. To any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and happy to answer any of those. Otherwise, thank you for attending and showing up this evening.
Thank you so much, Alex. That was really informative.
What was the thing you found the most interesting, Hannah?
Oh my gosh, there's like quite a lot. Do you know what? I already knew about that because one of my things is the blocked nostril in the morning.
Yeah.
Every morning, but yeah, sometimes that happens. And I saw Mary, who's a breathwork facilitator, she said about that, shaking her head.
Yep.
And it worked so well. It's unbelievable. That works so well. The acid alkaline balance and I can't remember what you called it, but what was it? Bicarbonate? Yeah. That was really interesting. The 3 different, it was a long time ago that I studied nursing, so but just that, yeah.
So what I also found out is that with the bicarbonate stuff, the kidneys essentially hold on to bicarbonate and as like a reservoir in case it needs to just go boom and dump a whole lot of it into the system in an emergency state to support the body blood pH or to support the body to breathe better.
Wow.
Which is super interesting. And the fascinating way I figured this out was by running my ultra marathons. And 2 months ago, I was doing a 100K race and I couldn't pee for the first 9 hours. And all of the aid stations often have fizzy drinks there, like Coca-Cola or lemonade or ginger beer. And essentially, if the body isn't getting topped up with bicarbonate through either the foods or fuels you're consuming or the fluids, and I was putting my body under a lot of stress, my kidneys were going, honk, I'm holding on to every ounce of this that I can, and I'm not going to let any of it go because I don't know what you're doing to me. And so it wasn't until I started sipping on Mountain Dew and ginger beer at about 80 Ks in that I could finally urinate after 9 hours. So absolutely fascinating. Right, we got some questions there, Melissa. Bloody brilliant. Notice the amount of day mouth breathing I've been doing. Immediately notice and close my gob. Fantastic. Awareness is the #1 tool that we have. Thanks, Jody, for attending this evening. Natalie, super intense aircon. My nose is always dry and uncomfortable. Unless I'm away, then it corrects. Is there any way to combat that dryness naturally? It's so tough. Obviously, you're probably really well hydrated throughout the day in a hospital. I do know quite a few nurses, doctors, and people that work in hospitals. I know they love smashing coffee. Coffee is a diuretic, which doesn't help you maintain your hydration level in your body. So that would be drink more water, less coffee is #1 tip. And I know that aircon sucks as well. Like I notice that if I go to like a hot, humid country, I don't know if you go to Bali or something and your bedrooms have air conditioning, it's always the worst. Your nose just goes to the wazoo. Maybe try and put micro breaks in your day by going outside would be like the #1 thing that I would probably encourage there, just so the body can connect back into that natural air level. Great question, Natalie. And if you do try any of those things, I'd love to hear how they go. Rosemary, sleep work, meditation before bed, amazing. Nasal breathing, fall asleep much faster and get a better rest. So cool. That's awesome. Sounds like you're doing the work. Daughter's a mouth breather, dry mouth morning. Any tips for children getting a good nose breathing habits? I did come in late. That's all good. Andrea, children, very interesting. Again, bringing awareness to their breathing. There's nothing wrong with like supporting a child to understand how their breath works. Shutting the mouth, practicing during the day is probably a really good one. Focusing on the breath whilst you're brushing your teeth. Okay. Toothbrush in the mouth, focusing on the breath through the nose whilst you're brushing your teeth for 2 minutes. Great technique. There is nasal tape for children out there. What I would recommend is that you test again with them practicing with the nasal tape during daytime before you start working into sleep time. And the other one is essentially strength of that jaw and amount of fiber in the diet. There's lots of research out there about the connection between fiber and diets and lazy mouths. So I'd encourage you to probably do a little bit of research on that front. And yeah, soft foods are not supportive of the palate that essentially runs along the base of that nasal cavity. And so the mouth can become really lazy, especially for children if they're not getting chewy, fibrous foods. Also plays into a lot of tooth development and stuff like that. There's been a lot of work out of Stanford on that, which is quite interesting. Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, we will call it a wonderful evening and we'll let Hannah get back to sleep. And for anyone that has not been able to attend live, we will be sending this recording out for you. And if you have any questions as well after watching the recording, feel free to fire them through to either myself or Hannah. Always happy to help, and wishing you a great evening.
Thank you, Alex.
Awesome. That all.
Night.